Arthur Copeman here for Plant Anglican, and I'm talking to the Reverend Canon Nathan Killick, rector of the parish of the Camden Haven on the east coast of Australia in the Australian Diocese of Newcastle. Nathan, can you tell me something about the context of ministry in the Camden Haven? So what does ministry look like in the Camden Haven?
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Arthur. And hello, everybody. The Camden Haven is a mid-north coast of New South Wales in Australia coastal parish. It's a big area for retirees. There's a lot of retirement villages, gated communities with perfect manicured lawns and roads, and everybody's living about 2 inches away from each other. So
a few years ago, you decided from your base in Laurelton to plant a church into the suburb of Bonny Hills. Yep. When you made that initial decision, why did you want to plant a church into Bonny Hills?
Well, interestingly enough, the story was that when I was first approached to consider being the rector of the parish of the Camden Haven, it was called the parish of called the church at Laurelton, and Laurelton's part of the Camden Haven. And I had no idea where Laurelton was. And so I, like most people in the world, had to look at a map and go, okay, that's where it is. And I think immediately looking at the map, I saw that there was a northern part to the parish and a southern western part to the parish, and that it was clear to me, the first thing I thought was we must plant a church in the northern part of the parish. And this was before I even had the opportunity to take up the position.
Why plant a church and not just encourage people to continue driving to Laurelton? What was the advantage that you saw in planting a church?
Well, a couple of things. The region that our present church building is in is an area that has maxed out in terms of its growth. North of us and west of us, there is all sorts of development going on. And so it seemed to me that the north was a priority. And in the north, when we looked at some of the demographics, there were things like, so the national average in Australia in the last census of people who ticked the Anglican box was 13%. But in Bonny Hills, it's 26%. So double the national average of people say that they're Anglican. And so we thought, well, we're a good brand up there, so we will give it a go. To ask people to come south, new people who aren't already connected with us, it was a bigger ask than just asking them to be local or go slightly north.
And when you first went to plant a church, tell us about that experience. So when you first went to plant a church.
I was pretty convinced that this was a good idea and really engaged every congregation with the idea and gave lots of opportunity for people to meet and talk about their thoughts and whether they were positive or negative about it, to be able to share that. It was quite a long process. It took months. I ran a lot of groups where people were able to attend and know what was happening and have their say, that sort of thing. So I thought that everything was great and moving forward. We even got to the point where we had a gathering in the place that we wanted to plant, at the time that we wanted to plant, with the people that we wanted to be in the plant, plus a whole lot of supporters. And it was there that everything came crashing down in a moment.
So can you, so what was the learning from the experience?
What happened was that 3 probably key stakeholders opposed the idea publicly at the final meeting at the end of a long process. And this surprised me. I was really caught out by it. I felt that everyone had been communicated with well, and others had told me that people had been communicated with well. But the thing I learned, I needed to communicate with people that I thought I had already communicated with, but it was always in a group and it was never one-to-one. Now, these people were key stakeholders in the parish and had investment, and they had something to lose if we started this new church plant, because it was at the same time as another congregation, but being north. And what I didn't do was sit down with them one-to-one and talk to them about it. I expected them to be forthright enough to be able to speak in a group about how they felt. Now, they weren't able to do that until that very final moment when they either spoke up then or forever held their peace. And that was really forcing them into that moment. Now, I don't know if I could have known that beforehand. I don't know if I could have gone, I should have done that. But now I know I should have done that.
How did you then arrive at a second go at the same plant?
Well, actually, it took me a while to recover. Maybe I was too hard on myself, and a lot of people said I might have been too hard on myself, and maybe I was, but I was pretty devastated that I had pushed people to this point where they had to speak up at the last minute. I needed to give an apology. So I actually did a formal letter apology to all the parish in case there were other people who felt the same way. And then really emotionally, I think I had to recover, but also the church had to recover a bit from that. And those stakeholders had to recover a bit. I'm sure they were tossing up whether they would stay or they would leave church. They've all stayed, which is great. It took a couple of years before we even entertained the idea of trying again. Yeah.
So what was different the second time round?
In the first instance, we were looking at planting an evening congregation. In the second instance, we looked at planting a morning congregation. It was really a recognition that there was a critical mass that already lived in Bonny Hills and just north of that, a place called Lake Cat-Eye, who could populate the beginning of a church plant, and we could give something a good go. So the second church plant was using different people than the first church plant was going to use.
So how's that church plant gone since?
Well, it began very well. We were really pleased with how it went. There was some good growth. We took 30 people out of our 10 a.m. congregation. All of the people who were planted up there were local people. So it sort of made sense for people. People didn't have as far to go. I did have one family who lived down south, the southwest area of our parish, who gave 2 years of their lives to help that place start. I think in God's providence, they were the key people to make that church plant work initially. Yeah.
Since then, what's developed?
Over a couple of years, we've grown from about 30 to it's about 55 to 60 people. Now, all of this was actually during COVID as well. So we actually had to pull up stumps on the whole thing. We all went online. It knocked the momentum down, knocked the wind out of our sails a bit. But then after COVID, things started to come back in a bit.
What are some of the current difficulties for the church plant? What are some of the things?
Well, if I can say, one of the difficulties has always been we went into this not having everything we needed to be able to do it. So we went into it needy, and we were asking God to provide. So the staffing that we had, really, we could sort of, if we staggered what we did, our preaching, that meant that I could preach 1 week here and then I could be up there the next week and that sort of thing. And that took me away from our congregations for half the time. So I was now gone 50% of the time. That was a big call, but people understood that this was a missional thing, and so they agreed and they were on board with that. What God did was brought someone into our region who was a minister who had actually gone through college with me, and he was being a bit of a change in life situation, and said, he rang me up one day and said, "Oh, I'm moving into the area. Is there any way I can help you at all?" And I said, "Yes, there is. You can help me run this church," of which he then took up the reins really well. And he's just doing 2 days a week, but that's a blessing and a provision, but 2 days a week is not enough. So our great challenge at the moment is to find somebody to focus on that congregation for more than this couple of days that we've got at the moment. And that's a pretty critical thing for us, because I think if we don't find somebody to do that, that congregation will probably fold.
What are some current blessings from the plant? What's a good thing that's happening up there?
Yeah, I think the people that are there are really approaching things missionally. That is, they're saying, well, here's our situation. It's not ideal. We don't have a full-time pastor to look after us all the time, but we have a 2-day-a-week person and they're doing their best, so we'll do our best as well. And so people have started up a Tuesday morning playtime to reach toddlers in the area. And that's been fantastic. They've done that off their own bat. They're working hard on that. And there is a women's group that started, and it's on a Saturday afternoon once a month sort of thing. And that's just exploring the story of one of the people in the congregation. And everybody loves a story. So people are coming along to that and listening to the story of this person. And it's open to believer and unbeliever alike, because the unbeliever comes in and loves to hear the story of what's happening with this person.
Thinking back over this whole experience, what would you say it's been the place of prayer in what you've done? It's been a particular place for prayer?
A lot of people are much better prayers than me, and they were working very hard in prayer. So every Sunday morning we would have a 9:30 service, but there would be people who turn up at 9, and at about 9:10 they would say, "Right, whatever you're doing, stop, come together. We're going to pray for this service today." And that group got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because people decided to come earlier to church to pray for the church service. So there could have been 20 people praying week after week for that. So prayer initially played a really important part. When COVID hit, it took that momentum out. We are actually having to rebuild that prayerfulness again.